It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Harav HaGaon, Dayan Moshe Aaron Kurtstag. I've had the great zchut to know you for many years. It's been the greatest zchut. So it would be wonderful if you could tell our listeners a little bit about your very, very choshev family, where your parents came from, and the history where you grew up and where you learned.
Okay, so it goes a little bit a long time ago. This, when I was born, this was 82 years ago. In Tel Aviv, my parents came from Poland. My father, my late father, came first as a chalutz in sometimes in 29, I think 1929. He was very strong Zionist as a youngster in Warsaw. Unfortunately, he became an orphan at a young age, so he had to look after himself, which he did, and he grew up actually in a shtibel, because his mother died and his father was in the First World War a prisoner of war, so he actually didn't have any parents at home.
He grew up in a frum family.
A frum family, Hasidic family, and but as he was, I think, 19 or so when he came to Eretz Israel, so it must be 27 or 29, on the 1929 when he came, and he knew my mother because when he was by himself, he used to eat a lot on Shabbatot because he didn't have a home. So he used to eat by my mother's family, that he knew from the shtibel. So when he was here, then he managed to bring out my mother as well. My mother, so my father unfortunately didn't have a chance to study because he had to look after himself from an early age, to work and to feed himself. My mother came from a very, I think, wealthy home, Hasidic of course, and she was a student of Sarah Schneer in Krakow. And I've got a picture somewhere. Where did I see it recently? And he brought her here. Was not so simple for her to live, as you know, the Hasidic rabbis and so on were against leaving Poland because thinking that you will not be able to keep Yiddishkeit. But she had one brother-in-law that also a Hasid, but he encouraged her to go. So they came here and they started the life here in Tel Aviv. My father was working in the, used to work, a shoemaker, not a shoemaker, he actually produced shoes. He had a little factory, and my mother, she was a teacher from a Beit Yaakov teacher, and then she actually started also to teach Beit Yaakov in Tel Aviv, and then afterwards she taught in other schools, and so we grew up. My father was working very hard. It was, as I said, times that I actually didn't see him only on Shabbat because he used to go early to work, and only came when I was already asleep. And we had, and they had 4 kids. I was oldest. I am the oldest, and I've got a brother. I don't know if you met a brother, Avshalom. And then my sister Sarah, and my younger brother is Chaim. You know Chaim? In Yom Chovoziel.
Is it in Beit?
So, but all of us went originally, grew up in Tel Aviv, not in a frum environment. We went to my parents, although my father was very Zionistic, religious Mizrahi, but they didn't compromise on education, and they sent all the children to Haredi schools. So we grew up, but in a religious home. The home was very, I say, today we live in such a luxury. We lived in a flat which had 3 rooms. One we occupied. My parents were 4 kids, 1 room. The other room was an uncle and an aunt. She was a half-sister of my father. They didn't have children, but we were like her children because she didn't have children. So this was the second room. Then was another room, a little bit. This were no-room family. My parents and my uncle and aunt shared the same kitchen. The bathroom, and it wasn't 2 bathrooms, bathroom and toilet were shared by 3 families. This was childhood. And so I went to school in Tel Aviv, from school, and they're talking about prior to 48. I was born 38. So, but then when look, I can tell you all stories from I don't know what, but
well, which school did you go to?
The school didn't exist after 48. It was a school called Talmud Torah Istadrut HaCharedim. This was the name of the school in Tel Aviv. But unfortunately, with the establishment of the state, so the school was a private school, and then the Iriyah took over, and they said that the principal, he was too old, he has to retire. So he wasn't prepared because it was his school, he built it, and the building was his, so he sold the school, and then the Iriyah government, I'm not sure, made arrangement for those that remain to finish school. So I entered primary school when I was 5, and because of that they couldn't have proper classes, so I went from Vav to Chet. I didn't go to Kita Zayin because they needed to have, so they combined these two. So I left, finished primary school when I was 12. And then I went to Yeshiva High School in Tel Aviv. It's called Yeshiva Chadash, Yeshivat Harav Amiel. So this now, when I was 12, It was 1950, must be something like that. Because I was born 38, 50 or something. And I went to Yeshiva Chadash. This is also was different setup.
Rav, could I ask you, growing up in the 30s and in the 40s, did your parents discuss about their family with regard to the Shoah when one got to know what had happened?
Well, they did. They themselves knew very little. They only knew that there is no contact. There is no that there is a war, but they didn't know what happened to their parents. Afterwards, they realized that they all went to were killed in the Shoah, but they never spoke about it. And yeah, it could be that if I look back, that maybe my mother, who came from a big family, from time to time maybe should fall into kind of a depression, cried and so on, but it was not something that was talking about. As you know, all people that at that time, they didn't speak about this.
Were there any survivors through the years that you found out that survived from the family, or?
Well, we had my father, my family, no one survived. My father had two cousins who survived, and they came to Israel. They say in the 50 in the 50s something, and they came. They were not in the concentration camp, but they managed to somehow.
The hiding was probably.
And they came, and so in this flat that I'm telling you, that we were one room and four kids. So the cousins, they were in a Ma'abara in Rishon LeZion, and the father, came with a little kid, and the father, the cousin, was working in Tel Aviv. So for the week, he was also staying with us.
Sure.
And what I can just say, very little that about Shoah, that only what I read, not much knowledge from my family, except we know that they were there. But I grew up at the time pre-State of Israel with the Etzel and Lechi, Haganah, and the Mandat.
You remember the British soldiers? And
yeah, I remember one day it was a curfew, and the British went from house to house to look for if there are any weapons. My father was sick, he was in bed, and he was brutally, soldier, get up, and because they want to see if there is under the bed. I remember as a child, the people from the Etzel, the youngsters, would put posters. They would were with mask, running, run away. This I remember. I remember when Ben Gurion declared in 48 state, my father unfortunately was in hospital. It was before Pesach, and also where we lived, it was on, I don't know if you know Tel Aviv a little bit, near Yafo. So in our building, it was a big building, was the Haganah position. I remember that we couldn't come from the front because it was facing the mosque, Hassan, whatever.
The mosque is still there. It's in the south of Tel
Aviv. Yeah. And they used to shoot, they were firing. So therefore, people came to the building from the back. They cannot be seen. And also was times that we had to leave the flat. It was dangerous, and we actually wandering, staying with friends of my parents on all different places. Yeah, this was childhood.
And Rav, with the food, there must have been food rationing, and it must have been food was very scarce during these times.
So we did at Sena. I tell my children, you couldn't have what you wanted. If you wanted to have eggs, you had to get some coupons. We have family. And I remember before Pesach, my mother saved coupons. She wouldn't give us eggs, or even maybe meat, in order to be able to collect it, to be able to use for Pesach. Yeah, this was a different scene. It was a different way of life. Today, what does the kids know about shortage of food or whatever? Yeah, but we lived, we grew up, and I think this put us to be stiff. So after I finished school, at 12 I went to the Yeshiva High School in Tel Aviv for 5 years. I don't know how I got there. I can only remember that as even before, once my father took me to it was in Beit Kurtstag in Rehov Levi, that this Yeshiva High School only started, and was the Shavuot night, and I saw boys are learning. I think that gave me a big impression. I went there. Also, when we lived in Yafo, near Yafo, now I'm talking about already after the state of Israel, so in Yafo was my father also, because he had Hasidic background, he used to take us as children to Hasidic Tish and so on. So it gave us some Hasidic flavor, Hasidic blood, although that he was not with a beard and what, but so I was after I finished 5 years, I finished Yeshuva Chadash, Rav Amiel. There was some attempts, somebody, an older ex that he was learning in Hebron, he tried to persuade me not to finish after for matric and to go to Ponevezh after the 3rd year. And so he took me to the Chazon Ish. I was 15. That he wanted to, I should ask the Chazon Ish if to go. And I had an interesting meeting with the Chazon Ish for the Greta, and he said to me, "You want to go?" I said, "Yes." The truth of the matter is that I didn't want to go. It was just brainwash. But I said to him, but my parents wouldn't let me, they want me to do a matric. So I remember he said, if you really want to go, your parents will allow you, because parents won't to see the children happiness. But he was right, I was not
You weren't
really that. So this was, then I went, continue in the issue.
But that meeting with the Chazon Ish must have made an indelible impression.
Yeah, I had two meetings. I had a year before, and I remember this was when I was after Bar Mitzvah, 13. The Rosh Yeshiva there encouraged us to go to the Chazon Ish to talk to him and learning. I remember this was my first time that I went to the Chazon Ish. I can remember very vividly. He was lying in bed, and I came and I said, I want to ask a question. He showed me in his bookshelf to take out the Gemara that I wanted to ask and ask him a question. Looked, yeah, it's a question. This was the first encounter. Then the second encounter when he wanted me to, brainwash to go to Ponevezh. Then on the fourth year, I continue the fourth year in the Yishuv, but in the fourth year I neglected the English subject because he was a terrible teacher, so I didn't do, and I told my parents maybe this was also a reason why I actually wanted to leave, because I couldn't get on with this English. So when I had to go to the last year, then the Menael of the high school said, you can't go to the last year because you don't have English. So the Rosh Yeshiva was Rav Kolodetsky. He said to me, maybe you should go to Merkaz Harav, the Yeshiva Merkaz Harav, and try to do an externi, learn by yourself and do Matrik, Bagrut, which I went. I went to try. I went to Merkaz Harav, and I got very close or friendly with Rav Avram Shapira. Afterwards he was the chief rabbi, and he was keen that I should come because he thought that this would be also a way that people afterwards will come after. But I said this, and I want to put my cards on the table. I will learn full day. At night I must learn secular to do Matrik. So he said he had to discuss it with Rav Tzvi Cook, the Rosh Yeshiva, and Rav Tzvi Cook didn't allow this. He didn't want to allow to have secular there. So I went back to the Yeshiva Chadash. I said, no, look, I must stay here and finish. And I had a friend who was in my class, and he said, look, I help you to catch up the English, which he did. I remember it was months Nisan, where the no yeshiva, the yeshiva had a flat somewhere in Chovalabi. The two of us were in this flat, and we learned 12 hours English a day.
Wow.
Until I wrote the Matrik and I passed. So this was, it brings me to 1955, at the end of 1955, September. Then my Rosh Yeshiva was keen that me and a very close friend of mine, we should go to Ponevezh. Elul, we went to Ponevezh. And I was there 2 weeks. I couldn't take it because it was very depressing. And on Shabbat, they didn't use light. As you know, they used the lamps. And the Mashgiach for Ponevezh of Chaskel Levenstein, you could feel, you can see he was under the spirit of Yom Adin, very, I couldn't take it.
But you had the Rav Kahneman, he was there at the same time?
Who?
Rav Kahneman, the Panavishra?
Sure. Rav Kahneman afterwards, he used to come to South Africa when I was in South Africa, but at that time I was there, but I didn't have a touch. I just came as a youngster, so I had to leave. And my friend, which incidentally was Arav Yitzchak Kosovsky's great-grandson. They were very close friends. And he said, if you go, I'll go with you. We went to Hebron. And Hebron at that time were 250 boys. And although that was already in the middle of Elul, we were accepted in stretched arms. And this is where we started Hebron. Today, it's unbelievable because if you want to go to Hebron, you had to, there is a selection, and a couple of months before, I know my Avishai, when he was sending a student to from Marava to Hebron, he had to have his connection and to send them and to select who are suitable and so on. That time is different. And in Hebron, I can say, I flourished. We learned well. I had a chavruta, as I said to you, Arav Baruch Shimon Salomon, who later became the chief rabbi of Petach Tikva. Unfortunately, he died a couple of years ago. Was more or less my age. And when I was in Hebron, a lot of things, Hebron, they allowed to do a lot of things. So on Thursday night, I used to go to Mir with my chavruta to listen to Reb Chaim Shmulevitz.
So Rav, if you could tell us, because it's legendary, they said that the halls were packed in the Mir. To hear Reb Chaim Shmulevitz was the highlight of the week. It was the highlight.
No, I won't say that. It was interesting. Shiur, he was like, his shiur was like a lecture. Everybody had to sit down. He wouldn't start before everybody sat. There were not very many people there. More at that time were koilel. Very few bochrim. And avrechim, many of them didn't stay for the shiur. We came to the shiur, and there were some remained. And also there were once a certain zman that the Chabura on Shabbat that Reb Chaim gave and a couple of bochrim from Hebron came. So Hebron, this was, they didn't get into your kishkes as long as you learn and develop yourself. Yeah, was a mashgiach, was Rosh Yeshivas giving shiurim. But
who was your Rosh Yeshiva and your mashgiach?
Rosh Yeshiva was, the Rosh Yeshiva was Reb Chaskel Sarna, and the other two brothers-in-law, Reb Moshe Chevroni, Reb Aaron Cohen, and the mashgiach was Reb Meir Chodosh. And I had a very close connection with all of them. One story which I can say, which will be interesting. Rav Chaskel Sarna, he was there Rosh Yeshiva. He suffered from diabetics, so I used to go for a walk. And he was asking a boy to accompany him that he could talk. So once he asked me to walk with him, in Geula, I remember. And he said to me, interesting, the yeshiva at that time, the Rosh Yeshivas used to give the shiurim in Yiddish. we spoke Hebrew. So it was very interesting. I will listen, and it wasn't like in Reb Chaim that everybody sitting. The show in Hebron, everybody was standing around. The Rosh was on a platform in Aron Kodesh, and people ask in the middle of the Reb Chaim wasn't, you were like at a lecture. He gave an hour, you can't talk, you have to listen. Afterwards you can argue. And he said to me, and what used to be in the shiur, I used to ask in the middle, in Hebrew. And the Rosh used to answer me in Yiddish. And it was a dialogue, I'm in Hebrew, in Yiddish. And he said to me, the following, he said, listen, you're actually right. We should give our shiurim in Hebrew, because it's a new generation coming from the new issue. But he said, you expect me as an old man to start now to give shiurim in Yiddish, in Hebrew? So he said, I actually suggest you people come from Yeshiva High School. You do a foreign language, English. You should have another foreign language as well, Yiddish, to be able to communicate with the old generation. It was a very interesting thought.
But could you understood Yiddish?
Yeah, I understood.
You could speak Yiddish.
Understood, but I couldn't speak.
But you could understand.
Yeah. So I said to him, look, I agree that you're right, but I personally don't see it a problem for me, because I understand and I communicate. But also the way my parents would only discuss things in English for us not to understand. But the cousins that I told you came from Europe, they spoke Yiddish, and from them I caught a little bit of Yiddish, and this way it helped me when I went to yeshiva to understand the yeshivas. So yes, when I was in Yerushalayim, so I came across a couple of from all generation. I had a friend that he had from his uncle some letters from the Chibiner's Rov father. So he said he's going to the Chibiner Rov to show him the letter or to give him the letters, and I went along with him. So this was interesting. The meeting, he asked us a question, and it was interesting. When I was in Hebron, I also, Geula, it was Arav Frank, was in that neighborhood. I remember going there to sometimes to talk to him, ask questions. Also with Rabbi Avram Shapira, that, as I said, later became the chief rabbi. He lived in the same. When I was in Hebron, they didn't have a big boarding place, so they rented flats. So I used to be in a flat which actually Rebbaun Chodosh, who is now the Mashgiach Emir Nebach, is very sick. It was after his wedding, so he rented out 2 rooms to Bochum. So I was there, and it was the same street that Rabbi Avram Shapira lived. So many times, many Motzei Shabbos, I used to call Rabbi Avram Shapira. We had discussion and learning. We had very interesting.
Rav, did you ever spend time with Rav Finkel in the mirror?
Only when before we got engaged. So my father-in-law came and he took me to meet Rav Finkel, because he was from Mir. But didn't have a connection. And but look, in my time, well, there's some, like he said, Rabbi Yitzchak Ezrachi, he was at that time in the yeshiva, Rav Baruch Mordechai Ezrachi. He was already married, but he was in the yeshiva learning. He had quite a occasion. So, in our engagement, it must be that there is a letter, a picture no, but there are pictures also. I'll show you.
This is a picture. This was at your engagement, and Reb Chaim Shmulevitz is in the middle.
Yeah, this is Arav Solomon. Baruch Shem Yisrael. This is Arav Solomon that became what I told you, the Rebbe in Petach Tikva. But I want to show you Yitzchak Ezrachi. He was in my engagement because, as I said, we had Reb Chaim Zev Finkel. This is Reb Chaim Zev Finkel. He was a Mashgiach in Mir. Also, he came to South Africa and he was friendly with my father-in-law, so therefore my father invited him to the engagement. Just a minute. There is interesting Arav Ezrachi. Reb Simcha Zisselbroide, do you know what you heard about him? Or
No.
So I was actually very, very close to him, and he actually was our Shadchan with Batya. Interesting story. But why? Where is this is Yitzchak Ezrachi as a young. Where is it?
This was at your engagement.
Engagement, this one. This. There is other there, Arav Shlomo Daichovsky, who was now in the Beit Din Elyon.
And Rav, could you tell who else is in the picture at your engagement?
This was Reb Chaim, my father-in-law, my father. This is Rav Simcha Kaplan, was a Rabbi of Tzfat. This is Rav Borodiansky, was a Rosh in the Yeshuva Chadash. Was a big, he's known, a big Goen. Here with Rav Farbstein and Bavon Farbstein from Hebron. But there is, I don't know what there is more the pictures that from that engagement that are, I think, have Baruch Mordechai Zachi also, I think, was there.
And Rav, could you show who was in the picture? And that's your parents and
This
your
was
in-laws?
This is my parents-in-law.
That's Rav Eloi
Rav Eloi and his wife. This is Batya, this is me. This is my mother, this is my father. This is Guaria, these were parents of my brother-in-law Schoenberg. This is the two cousins that I told you that came from Shoah. And this is my uncle and his wife, which I told you share the same flat.
This is very special, right?
And here, this is my brother Avshalom. This is my sister Sarah. You know Sarah Katz in Israel. And this is my younger brother Chaim. So this was our family at the time.
Rav, if you can show it a little. Oh, it's wonderful. Such a so special, Rav. So. And Rav, with Rav Eloi, can you just mention a little bit about where Rav Eloi learned and what you knew of Rav Eloi?
Rav Eloi he was born in a place called Dokshitz. He also had became very in young age that he his mother was died very young, and then he was also 14 or 15. His father, I think, remarried and he didn't get on with the stepmother, so he actually left to Vilna to work. He worked before because he had a special talent in kind of bookkeeping and so on. So he went to Vilna, and when he was in Vilna, somebody, the Rosh Yeshiva, whatever, caught him and said, "Come and learn." So he went to Remailis Yeshiva in Vilna, and this is where he used to daven with Reb Chaim Oizer, Minyan. Reb Chaim Oizer had a Minyan, and he learned, and this is where Reb Chaim Oizer, that once he learned, he was davening and learning so good, so Reb Chaim Oizer put an hand on him and he said, "You can already become a rabbi in America."
Sure.
So he learned in Vilna, and afterwards from them he went to Yeshiva Slonim, and from Slonim he went to Mir. And there is somewhere is about Avishai. He will tell you more about his youth, because Avishai spent a lot of Shabbatot with him after my mother-in-law passed away. So my father-in-law was still a rabbi in Beria. He was in a flat. So during the week, he was by himself. He had a maid, but Shabbos, well, the children used to be, as Avishai was with him a lot of time. And so this is brought us to the time of...
So Rav, I just want to mention about Rav Eloi, your father-in-law, Zichron Libracha. Coming from South Africa, I remember the Rav very well. I gave him a lift and I was in Yeovil, and I think without any hesitation I can say that Rav Eloi was the most loved rabbi that ever set foot in South Africa.
So as I said, Rabbi Eloi was the most loved person, because he loved people.
And he knew every family.
He loved people. He loved people, and he was connected with so many people.
With every family he was
He
connected.
can tell you about your grandfather and your grandmother and so on. Yeah, and he was very dedicated to his work, and whatever he did. He was a perfectionist. Whatever he did, laning or davening or in the Bezdin, a secretary, and everything he did was perfect. And obviously, I only became close to him when I came to South Africa. Because like this, we didn't have, we got married, we lived in Israel.
And did you go to Kollel after you got married?
Here, in Tel Aviv. This Arab Bordiansky was a Rosh Kollel. And so only when we came, of course we had letters and we had connection telephonically or letter, but the main connection came when we came to South Africa.
So Rav, could you explain, how did you get the position? Why did you decide
to come to South Africa?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have to close the chapter first of all with Hebron. It was an amazing time, and we got married. The condition, not our condition, this was a plan, that we live in Israel. I go to Kollel, which I was in the Kollel, which Rav Unterman, who was the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, he was like the head of the Kollel, but Rav Bordiansky was the Rosh HaKollel. And I live, the plan was to learn there, to study there 5-6 years. My father-in-law helped us financially, but he worked. I went to the Kollel, and after 2 or 3 years, I can't remember, I was pushed or attracted. A friend of mine who started the Yeshivat Bnei Akiva in Netanya. And he started, and he had a fight with the committee, and he was scared that this is going to be the yeshiva going to end up and so on. So he asked me to come and take this position. So I was not ready yet. I wanted to actually continue learning, but I thought, okay, maybe I always thought about education. This was I always. So I was Rosh Yeshivat Bnei Akiva in Netanya for 2 years, and we didn't have children. We were married now 5 years. We didn't have children. So a suggestion was maybe you should go to South Africa. Maybe this is what we have to do. To go. This is how we go to South Africa. I had the offer. They had a very small rabbinical seminary, like they had the Hebrew teacher seminary. They started a rabbinical seminary on the same Rabbi Ilevitz. You knew Rabbi Ilevitz?
I heard the name.
He was the principal. The head of the who was behind it was Rav Kaspar.
He was the chief rabbi.
He was the chief rabbi. So they said, maybe I should come and help in training local rabbis in South Africa. So this year I came to South Africa.
And what year did you come to South Africa?
I came in 1967, January 1967.
So and I left before the
Six-Day War, a couple of months before. About January, the Second War was June. So I was there.
And was this the first time that you had come to South Africa?
I was there. We got married in South Africa. I can show you pictures from a wedding. If you may know some people.
In which shul were you in South Africa? Were you married?
We were in Greenside Shul. There is a dancing here, but again.
Was it very strange coming to South Africa? It must have been a different world coming from Eretz Israel.
Sure, very different. You know Shlomo Mandel? Chaz Mandel, do you know?
Sure, Chaz Mandel was. Oh, Rav, you can just turn
Listen,
it. Hold on, Rav.
Wait, I don't know why there is no picture from the Chubeh. This is a Rav Broide, Rav Simcha Zisra Broide from Hebron came to our wedding because he was the Shadchan. Can you see?
Yeah.
But interesting that why I can't see there is dancing. There is a dance here that Rabbi Louis Rabinovich, he was a Meseder Kiddushin.
If we can have, if you could show the picture of Louis Rabinovich.
Wait, I am looking for it.
So he was legendary. He was.
He was the chief rabbi, but he was already about to retire. But he was very close to my father-in-law, so obviously from the work of the Beit Din and so on.
And then he came to Yerushalayim. I think he became the deputy mayor.
Yeah. So there was a lot of people. There were 1,000 people in the wedding. Of course, I didn't know many of them. I didn't know any. This was a wedding that only 2 weddings, I think, took in South Africa, where men and women were separate. My sister-in-law, Winnie, you know Winnie? Gurari.
Oh, okay, Gurari, sure.
Their wedding was separate, and our wedding. But you can see here the dancing. And
Rabbi Ali, yeah.
Rabbi Ali used to say he used to have 2 pockets. One pocket Chabad and one pocket Mir. Yeshiva. It was close to the Rebbe Chabad, but he had his full contact with the Rosh Yeshivas of the literature.
But you know, when they went to Shanghai and to Japan with the Sugihara visas, there was also a group from Chabad that also went.
Yeah.
There were more than 30 Bachrim from Chabad that was also with them.
Yeah, but he was a combination of these 2. And
so this is a picture.
He said, "It's my father-in-law father, and this is my mother-in-law father. This are 2 fathers, and this is Winnie. She was born there in Europe. And these are, this is my father-in-law and my mother-in-law.
It's Rabbi Eloi.
Rabbi Eloi and his wife.
And Rav, you have a very special picture here of Rabbi Eloi with the
Lubavitcher Rebbe. He likes to know about the history. Which one? This is Sichot Musar, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, It was not printed, it just was in a stencil. And he sent it to me with somebody that came from Mira to collect me, whatever. And this is what he wrote. That is from Taf. I don't know, I can't read his handwriting. I think it said, לידיד נפשי הרב הגאון, אומר קורטסטאג, נתינה לאות ידידות, as a sign of friendship, חיים שמואלביץ. Yeah. He was unbelievable.
And Rav, did you ever ask the Rav Shmulevitz Shilas when you went to his shiur?
Yeah, after the shiur, but it wasn't the shilas in Halacha. This is the shiur.
From the shiur.
Yeah, but I remember once I came, I said, okay, now they want to involve. I said the shiur was an hour from I think 7 to 8, and that's it. But it's quiet and it's completely different to what other shivas. And the way that was like I would say, lehavdil, like a lecture at university.
But it must have been a most
amazing,
inspiring and incredible
amazing. But this was not shiur in Gemara. This was Sichot Musar, Musar Shmusar.
And he gave you some others for him as well.
No, three. There were three. That was three. Now it's already published in one book.
And he gave you before they were published.
I don't think if I've got it. My children have got the book. And he sent all of them. This was from Tafshin Lamed Bet, Tafshin Lamed Aleph, the same story. Le'edidi, Tafshin Lamed Aleph. Lamed Aleph is what was the Goyish Lamed Aleph means today we are Pei Aleph, so 80 to 30, 50 years ago.
Sure.
50 years ago. So Tafshin Lamed Aleph, and then Tafshin Lamed Bet, and Tafshin Lamed Gimel. All these three he sent to me.
Rav, I just want to thank you if I can.
Yeah, listen, you must drink something, you must...
Rav, don't worry.
You don't need a bathroom, but don't you're like an angel.
Rav,
not like an angel.
Rav, I just want to thank you. Ein milim, there are no words. Rav, not only are you great in stature, but in intellect, you are Harav HaGaon. Really, we are, the South African Jewish community, we're so privileged to have known and to have had your father-in-law and to have had you.
Yeah, my father-in-law.
But to have had you,
I learned a lot from my father.
But Rav, to have had you as a Rav, me personally in Bnei Akiva, but to have a based in for 30 years.
Well, we discussed.
It's a great schut that we had, and Rav, thank you so much for. It's been wonderful hearing.
No, thank you.
It's been very special, and from the bottom of my heart, I want to really thank you.
Tonight.
We have a shiur, and it's wonderful.
We are 8 o'clock, not 9 o'clock.
So Rav, thank you so much, and I cannot thank you enough.
Okay, thank you. So we'll make another thing. I'll tell you a couple of nice stories from South Africa.
Thank you so much.
I have to now that I know what you're interested in.
Not only me, the whole Jewish world is interested in.